E2E, fancy names. So by the way, so this example, so I didn't go to the trouble of drawing these pretty tables. So these are slides that go with Kleinberg-Tauder's book on algorithm design. Okay, so these are slides by Kevin Wayne, I believe. Okay, so these are a men and women's preference list. So let's see what happens under Gale Shapley. Victor goes out first, proposes to Berta. So what does Berta do? Well, she has to accept him, right? So no other options. So she accepts him, since previously unmatched, provisionally. Wyatt goes out, proposes to Diane. Right, so again, she's unmatched, she accepts him. So now things become more interesting. Javier goes out, proposes to Berta. So what does Berta do? Reject Victor, accept Javier's proposal, right? Because she prefers him. Now, so Victor goes back to being unmatched, right? So we immediately give him the next chance. He goes out and proposes to Amy, right? Amy is unmatched, so she accepts Victor. Good. So the next unmatched guy now is Yancy. Yancy goes out and proposes to Amy, right? But Amy actually prefers her current partner to him, so she rejects Yancy. Okay, next thing he can do is he goes to propose to Diane. Okay, Diane actually doesn't like Wyatt so much. She prefers Yancy. She accepts Yancy. Kind of Wyatt. Now Wyatt again has to propose. So he proposes to Berta, but Berta is currently already matched with her top choice. She rejects him. He goes to propose to Amy. No luck. She prefers her current partner. Okay, further down the list, he goes and proposes to Claire. Claire actually likes him a lot, right? So Claire accepts. So Wyatt now is provisionally matched. Okay, so now we are doing well. Okay, so we still have one guy who have to propose, Zeus. So he goes out and proposes to Berta. Okay, Berta doesn't like him at all. She rejects him. Next, he proposes to Diane. Diane prefers him to her current partner, so she rejects Yancy, accepts Zeus. Okay, Yancy is now unmatched. Yancy is already pretty far down his preference list, so he continues. He goes to propose to Claire. Claire rejects him. Claire doesn't like Yancy. He goes further down. He proposes to Berta. Right? Berta doesn't like him. Right? And finally he proposes to Erica, whom, as you can see, none of the guys really likes too much. So no one has proposed to her yet. So finally he proposes to Erica, and Erica, being unmatched, accepts. Right? And that's the end of the execution of the algorithm. So as you can see, so we ended up with a matching. So it almost feels like a contradiction with what I was saying, right? So it's men proposing, but if you look at kind of how women are placed in the ranking of men, they're not doing very well, and women sort of do very well. Okay, but still not as well as they could be doing. So what would be the woman optimal matching here? There's a very simple woman optimal matching here. Top choices, right? Right, and that's different from this, right? So woman optimal would be to swap Zeus and Victor. Right, and obviously when each woman gets her top choice, this is stable. Right, because obviously if each woman gets her top choice, no woman can be involved in a deviation. Right, so it's, okay, so women get their worst valid partners. Their worst valid partners are still not too bad, but they're not getting their best valid partners. Okay, so that's the example. Right, so we can only have, well, partition into pairs, or like pairs of singletons alternating somehow. Right. They give an alternate. 1, 2, 1.
Right.
Yes.
So 2, 1, 2, 1. Let's do the cases.
Right. So basically, so we boil down to two cases: 2, 2, 2, and 2, 1, 2, 1. Right. And 2, 1, 2, 1. Right. So there may be, it depends on who is 2 and who is 1, where the vertex of a triangle or not.
Will always be a better deviation. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So for every, so you think for every partition into singletons and pairs in a triangle would be an improvement. Right, because every partition into pairs and singletons gives utility at most 6 to every pair. Right, and in a triangle, every member of the triangle gets 8.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think
that's a clean argument. Yeah. Did we do 2, 2, 2? It's similar, I guess. Let's see.
Well, still, right? Even if they're in pairs, right? So they're still getting at most 6 each. In a pair, you get most
right.
the value of penetration tension.
Yeah, that's true. Doesn't matter how. Yeah. Okay.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. So without triangles, no one gets more than 6.
That's true. Hmm. Okay, so in this section on stable matchings, and we'll probably come back to games in a bit. Um, so maybe we can ignore the sixth question. That's just to give you a feel for the fact that an instance can have multiple stable matchings, and you might want to think about if you could choose between these stable matchings, are there matchings? So given two stable matchings, getting a feel for whether everyone prefers one matching over the other and things like this. Okay, so that's just really more for practice. The fifth question should be mostly easy, so maybe we can go through that quickly. So true or false? Okay, so if a man M and a woman W each put each other at the top of their respective preference lists, then M and W must be paired with each other in every stable matching. Is that true? Okay, all right. It's not like I remember, so let's see. Uh, so people who say yes should have an argument, and people who say no, I think, should have an example, right? Or the other way. But anyway, right. And someone else. Let's try that. Okay. So, so you're arguing by contradiction. So suppose not, then there is a stable matching that doesn't match M and W to each other. Right. So M is matched with W prime and W is matched with M prime, and this is supposedly a stable matching. Right, so MW become a blocking pair because they both prefer each other over their current partners. Right, so you could also go through the algorithm. That's true, but that gives you one stable matching though, yeah. Right, so yeah, it's a good point. So the algorithm is a start, but you want to show that any stable matching matches these guys, and that's a straightforward argument. I think for the second one, we may have actually seen an example even during the lecture. I'm not sure, but okay. Um, so it's the opposite. If a man M and a woman W put each other at the bottom of their respective preference lists, then M and W cannot be paired in any stable matching. So I think there was an example which may show, yeah, Kyle and Carl or something. Okay, let's see. Um, oops. Okay, this one, I guess. Claire has Kyle at the bottom of her preference list, and Kyle has Claire at the bottom of his preference list, and yet there is a stable matching that, in fact, every stable matching matches them. Okay, so false, yes. Okay, if everybody's preference lists are exactly the same, then there is exactly one stable matching. True. Okay. Okay. Right. Right. So let's say for every man, the preference ordering is W1 over W2 over Wn, and for every W, it's M1. So by this I mean for all J, Mj, and for all J, Wj. It's always confusing. So, okay, so let's just quickly run the algorithm to come up with a stable matching, and then we'll argue that that's the only one. So you're saying, so what happens is that, let's say M1 proposes to W1 and W1 accepts, and then M2 proposes to W2 and W2 accepts, and so on. So actually this probably follows as a corollary of the statements that we have seen, because in this case, every woman gets her top preference. Oh no, sorry, this is not true. Okay, that's a slightly different example. I was wondering if we can get it as a corollary of this matching even being woman optimal, but okay, that can probably be argued. Let's come back to that. But you had a more direct argument? Proof by contradiction. So, okay, so suppose there was a different stable matching that did not do this, then okay. Okay, so Mi is not matched with Wi, right, is matched to Wj, and this is the smallest Mi for which this happens, so I suppose J is greater than I, right? Okay, and okay, so put it this way. And again, K is greater than I, I suppose. Right, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, because J is greater than I and K is greater than I, Mk and Wj are both further below Mi and Wi in their respective preference orderings. Okay, so that would make sense. So there cannot be an I for which this happens. Yeah, so yeah, sure. So what I was wondering is, so this, if there's a unique stable matching, then that's both man optimal and woman optimal, right? Because there is only one to go around. So I was going to argue that the matching produced by Gail Shapley is the woman optimal matching. Then that would imply that the matching is unique, or okay, okay. Then there aren't other matchings. Okay, let's see. Okay, that's a good point. I Yes, so I think what is true is that you can impose a partial order on the space of all stable matchings, where the man optimal is sort of the maximal element, if you like, and the woman optimal is the minimal element, and everything in between. So the partial order is based on, uh, right, right. So to that extent, I think that would be true. that means that there is only one valid partner for everyone. Yeah. So instances where the stable matching is unique are also instances where the number of valid partners that everyone has is exactly one for everyone. So, right, because there is only one matching. So, and if the man optimal and woman optimal are the same, then as you're saying, these things coincide. So that would imply that the other way is true too. Okay, good. So again, is there a one-line argument like this one showing that you cannot have two men who have the same woman as their best valid partner? So that's true because of what we showed, that the man optimal matching is a matching, right? So it follows from what we saw, but I'm just wondering if there's an independent argument. So let's just think about that for a second. So I wanted to keep this in case it's useful for one of the other exercises. So let's see. So everyone who is ranked higher than W for both of these men are not valid partners, meaning there is no stable matching that extends matching M1 to anyone above W, or that extends matching M2 to anyone above W. But okay, the fact that these are valid partners would imply that there are stable matchings that extend M1 match to W and M2 match to W. So let's take one where maybe M1 is matched to W. And let's look at where M2 is. So let's look at W's preference ordering, and I guess without loss of generality, let's assume that W ranks M1 higher than M2. Or maybe M2 higher than M1. So one of these will get me to a contradiction faster, I think. So let's see. So suppose M2 is matched to somebody else in this stable matching. It cannot be anybody higher than W. So it has to be somebody worse than W. So let's call this W prime. Okay, but W prefers M2 over M1 and M2 prefers W over W prime. So you have a blocking pair. Yeah? Is that okay? Cool. Why the blocking pair? So okay, okay, so maybe let me just recap the whole thing because it's 3 lines. So W is a valid partner for both M1 and M2. Is also the best valid partner, but we'll use that only later. But because W is a valid partner for M1, there exists a stable matching where M1 and W are matched. So let's look at that stable matching and let's ask whom does M2 get matched with in that stable matching, and let that woman be W prime, right? Let's also look at W's preference ordering, and let's assume that W ranks M2 higher than M1. If W ranked M1 higher than M2, then we would look at the stable matching. So the argument is symmetric. Okay. So W ranks M2 higher than M1, suppose, and then we are looking at this stable matching. And let's say M2 is ranked with W prime in this stable matching. So since this is a matching, W and W prime are distinct. And since W is the highest placed valid partner for M2, W prime has to be worse than W for M2, right? because if W prime was better than W for M2, then W prime would also be a valid partner, and then that would contradict the assumption that W is the best valid partner for M2. So M2 certainly prefers W over W prime, and W prefers M2 over M1 by assumption. Okay, so they form a blocking pair. And as I said, if this was the other way, then you would have looked at the other matching. So, okay, so that is a direct argument. Now let's, so as I said, I'm happy to omit the 6th question from this discussion. 7th question is some food for thought. I don't know how long it takes to actually come up with the examples. But essentially, it's a nice question because it ties together a notion that we have seen for elections in the context of matchings. So we have talked about strategic voting in the context of elections and voting rolls. And so if you think about it, Gale-Shapley is one particular sort of mechanism for coming up with a stable matching. And as you've probably guessed by now, since there is a lot of stable matchings to go around for a general instance, there may be other mechanisms for coming up with stable matchings as well. And in fact, there are. And different mechanisms have their pros and cons, but okay. So you can ask the question of strategic behavior in this context as well, right? And there are two notions of, so the basic notion of strategic behavior for any mechanism would be that can somebody misreport their preferences or lie about their preferences and get a better outcome from the mechanism. So that would be one mode. But if you fix Gale-Shapley, then you can actually have more fine-tuned notions of strategic behavior, which is to say that it might indirectly go back to somebody misreporting their preferences, but basically a woman can choose to not reject somebody when they're actually supposed to reject them by the protocol, or they can choose to accept someone even though the protocol requires them to reject that person. And then that affects the flow of the algorithm later, right? So, so in settings where you don't submit your rankings up front, there may be scope of doing this kind of step-by-step manipulative behavior. So although it's not in the tutorial sheet, you can think about the first type of manipulation as well, where you're asked to submit rankings. Can you submit a ranking different from your truthful ranking and get an outcome that's better for you? So that's worth thinking about, certainly. And then there is the problem that's actually in the tutorial sheet. So.